Great, thank you. Now I've got a question for Bill, and I know the answer to this question, but I think it's important for people to hear out there. Despite your hesitancy, and I heard some concern when Erin moved out, have you found that she does things more independently now that she's not in your home? And can you expand on that? I love this story. She manipulates her dad.
Which story is this?
Well, I mean, you'll ask her to do something, she doesn't do it, she goes to her own apartment, she does all of it.
Oh yeah, exactly. When she comes home, she's still a different person than when she's living in her own apartment, because her expectations there are very different than, she grew up with. And I tell people, not that she could ever tie her shoes, but, when a child's living with you, if you get impatient yourself, you'll do it for her. And when she's on her own, she has to do it, so she's become very independent. When her sister lived in Colorado, we used to take her to visit, and she'd show up with her suitcase all packed and knew what to do when we went to the airport and everything else. So she grew an awful lot being out on her own.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about with our clients is no matter what people's abilities are, they always have the ability to manipulate their parents. Another question that we had, and I don't know whether anybody knows anything about this, but about housing, group housing complexes. We see things around the news in South Carolina and Michigan about group housing or communities of people with disabilities living together. Have any of you heard of this happening? Is that happening? Can that happen?
I saw this question, I wasn't exactly sure how to answer it. I mean, the answer is yes, we do have some HUD properties that involve many people, 8, 10 people living together, where there might be some design elements and programmatic elements that speak to, I think, that the heart of this question. But in general, the trend is away from large settings. So we're looking at 2, 3-person apartments, duplexes, houses, just a typical community landlord experience out there. But there are sometimes special projects that we'll get at. And then we have some individuals that have Prader-Willi syndrome. Sometimes those environmental restrictions and precautionary efforts, they benefit from living together and having that shared experience. So it's a yes and a no, I guess.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Okay, thank you. I think we got a follow-up question about child input or adult child input. And the question is, and Cheryl, I think this is probably for you. Are you saying that legally parents have to go to court and get guardianship of their child when they turn 18 if they need 24/7 care?
No, that's not what I'm saying. It may be appropriate in some circumstances. It really does depend on the situation. But once somebody is 18, if they do not have a guardian in place, or they haven't identified somebody to act as a personal advocate that can speak on their behalf, then we do need to look at who legally needs to sign and agree to the services that they're receiving.
Thank you. I think that covers it terrifically. Here's a question that probably for the parents or anybody who's been part of a team in helping a person move out of the parental home. How do you go about with a lower functioning adult child to convince them that it's okay to live away from their parents?
I guess in Frankie's situation, he was the one who made that decision himself. So he wanted to move out. Later on, when he had made the big move and we had the services in place, and he wanted to move back home, it was not easy, but it took time, and just reminding him that he's an adult now, and he did have services, that helped out. So
I think part of that is transitioning the whole time too. Like I said, we had Erin going to camp, so we knew that there were times that she was away from us, and she knew that we would come back and get her. So I think it's a constant transition. That was part of the reason I liked doing it at the end of school, because, like I said everything else in her life stayed the same. She was just sleeping somewhere else. She had some new caregivers and all of that, and I was up there all the time in the beginning, but it gave me eyes and ears everywhere of people that I already knew and that she already knew and that we were all working with, so it worked really well for her.
Thank you. Rachel, I think this question's for you. It says, with Ohio shared living, what about respite or a parent needing to step away for a weekend or a week? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, either if you're a family mentor or non-family member, you would receive at least 7 respite days a year. Essentially, those are paid vacation days, because we do have mentors all over Ohio that are, some people just want to be respite mentors, some want to be full-time, some you can have more than one individual in the home, so you would get those 7 paid vacation days. 7 to 10 only if based on the level of the needs of the individual, but typically with the individuals that I've seen, it's just been 7.
And thank you. And along the respite care, and maybe this would be for the representatives from the county board, is respite care a good way to start that, hey son, you can do a little bit without me watching you? Or hey daughter, you need to do this? Can you talk a little bit about how respite care works into an ISP and those kind of things?
I think it just becomes part of that conversation that begins. I mean, there's ample opportunity to set the stage for this, whether it's those weekend trips to Rec Unlimited, whether it's family vacations, or maybe with staff going on a brief outing. One thing we build into our group is trying to set up, whenever you're looking at roommate matches, outings together and then overnights together and kind of see how that works. We can rule out a lot of things, especially when you're trying to bring in different family values and different kind of morals and principles that are a clash initially. So there's always a kind of a honeymoon period, and we try to work with people through that. And then it tends to smooth out after a few months, hopefully. And then if not, we're having a different conversation. But yeah, I think respite is one way to do that, especially if it's planned respite. We have emergency respite too if things fall apart.
Okay. Chris, you have something to add?
Yeah, I agree with what Jeff is saying. But I also want to talk about, and we mentioned earlier about really having those expectations early on at like 14, 15, 16, talking about the expectation is to move out if that's your desire. We don't want to get in a situation where we're at 18 and now we're just thrusting them into a new situation. It can be very difficult to make that situation very bad the first time and they never want to go back to that.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have anything to add about respite care? And is that something that the providers in the home, is that something All Our Friends does, where you have somebody just for a weekend? How's that? That's something that happens?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask us. So respite is not something that All Our Friends does. For us, again, we're not one of those really large programs. So finding a staff, the staff we have for home provider care right now, we're using them to the maximum. I mean, there's not much wiggle room with their hours. So to take somebody on 24/7 for a week is really hard for us to coordinate. That's where, like what I think Rachel was talking about, where they've got the mentorship. I mean, that's awesome. That would be something to look into.
Great, thank you. I want to transition just a little bit. We got a question, and it kind of goes back to a person with more involved physical issues and needs. And so this question says, can someone talk about residential services for a person with a feeding tube and a wheelchair? Anybody seen that? Boots on the ground? What's that look like? How does that look? And I see Cheryl, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to call on you.
Sure.
And maybe Critty, then, if you could talk about if there's anybody in any of your housing units. Thanks.
Okay. With many of the support providers, there are certain nursing tasks that can be delegated. There's training that direct care staff need to go through in order to be able to do that. But there's also skilled nursing that there can be an assessment for to see if that can be provided through Medicaid, basically. It can be home health hours where somebody is dropping in just maybe a couple of hours a week, or it can be skilled nursing. But there are assessments that people go through to see if you meet the level of care for that. we have seen that in a number of different situations where it can be delegated with a feeding tube. There's others where the nurse, because of the type and maybe what's going on with the person, that a nurse needs to do it.
Thank you. Curdy?
I want to first kind of bring up something that as you're looking at transitioning things, that you really need to take a look at your support team. As you know, we're a three-legged table, and that's how we stay steady. You know, you've got your county board, you've got your housing partner, and then you have the providers. So when you asked me to speak to any individuals in our homes that might need some special care, we do have some. There is a threshold with building codes that I'm not going to get into, but there's a certain level of threshold that if the home starts becoming kind of like a skilled nursing facility in itself, that's really not something that is condoned in the communities. It becomes an institution. But to the individuals that we have in wheelchairs or might need some special feeding or that kind of service, we do have some. We've accommodated our houses for them. And then when I started with the county board and the providers being our partners, because we have a lot of people coming in and out of our houses, whether it's our field techs that are doing maintenance in the home, whether it's subcontractors, vendors that we need some specialty work in the home. We have fire inspections that happen, HVAC inspections, and what protects those individuals the most is great communication from the county board and our provider partners. If there is something unique happening with an individual that they're not doing really well right now, can you please hold off on sending anybody in the home for a little bit? We hear that, and it's great, and it works out great. So, I really want to make sure that as you're all having conversations and team conversations, that everybody understands that we're all in it together, and we're all trying to help, and communication is a huge thing.
Thank you. So I think the overall theme, if I'm hearing correctly, is that no physical or intellectual limitations or challenges should stop parents from seeking residential living outside of the home if that's what they want and the adult child they're working with wants. Is that, I'm seeing nods, right?
Yes.
Terrific. This is a question about psychological supports. So it says, much has been discussed about physical transition. Do any agencies offer psychological and emotional services to both work with the individual and family? I think that kind of goes back to the other question about trying to help the child realize that living outside the house might be better than living inside the house, and then also maybe parents getting over the fear of their child living out. Is that something that would be covered under Medicaid that comes along with a waiver? Anybody speak to that? Jeff, thanks.
So I'll just offer kind of what we do there. Really the Medicaid and the counseling supports if needed, there's social supports, boundary supports, maybe working on emotional regulation. That is primarily working with the individuals and roommates to get at that piece once they've moved out. For the family support, we have a program called What's Next, where families can be invited to. It's kind of a more intimate program, 6 or 8 weeks, where you'll have 10 families that are kind of stepping through and asking all those questions and thinking it through and planning a little bit. And I think they touch on some of the anxieties there. But in terms of actual family support, that would likely on our end be a private pay if the family needed to sit down and consult a professional.
Great. And you correct me if I'm wrong, private pay means that it's not coming through a county service or Medicaid. It would be parents' private health insurance perhaps, or out of pocket.
Correct, yeah. It's designed so all the dollars flow pretty much through the individual, even at the county level. It's to support the individual counseling needs, not necessarily the family. I wish it could be that way, but limited funds sometimes.
Thank you for that. Let's see. Here's a question. Can you use more than one agency with your waiver? It seems that different agencies offer different services. I'm seeing a parent shaking her head over there. Jill, you got a mic?
Yes, you can. As I've said, my son does get care with a support staff from a certain company, and then he goes to a day program at All Our Friends. So, yeah, it is available for different services.
Great, thank you. The next question is about the differences in I want to go back, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. Jeff, you mentioned something about boundary, what was that, boundary limitations? Can you, might be a new word for folks.
Yeah, I kind of just threw that out there. The idea is just sometimes that overlapping values, that sometimes you come into issues with roommates and privacy lines. So somebody intruding on another person's private space, bedroom or otherwise. And so establishing healthy boundaries within an apartment or whatever housing you might be utilizing.
So working with the residences and sometimes their families to respect boundaries.
Yeah, so tangentially to getting therapeutic services for the individual, you may very well in a clinical environment be touching on boundaries with family, because that, I mean, it's an adjustment, right? I forget to use the term going from, oversight over the entire household in a family environment to suddenly, kind of more of a management role and monitoring role. And so that's tough for all parties involved, and I think we recognize that. So that's one way you kind of get at those topics, but it would be still through the individual counseling.
Terrific, thank you.
modality.
Thank you. Now I'll get to the question that I was starting before. This one came for Ryan Cook specifically. Can you talk about the different levels of funding for the waivers and how many hours per week each one covers? Boy, I'd want a cheat sheet for that one, but.
Well, I have some help. I guess the coordinators here help me chime in. So, since we're talking about home provider care, I'll focus on that. So there are multiple waivers, and Jeff touched on that earlier. There's the self waiver, the level 1 waiver, the IO waiver. I'm sure some of you guys are already familiar with those waivers. And they're just structured differently. So for home provider care, IO waiver is kind of the golden ticket. That's what we joke about. It's kind of the waiver you want to be on if you're pursuing 24/7 care, if you're pursuing around-the-clock care, because that's the only waiver that you're really going to be able to get that if the individual requires a lot of assistance. The self waiver is a newer waiver. Of the 3 waivers, it's the only waiver that all the funding is one pot of money. And so it's usually reserved for more independent individuals. It wouldn't make sense to give it to somebody who has higher needs if they were going to a day program, because if they were like a 1-to-3 ratio day program, that would be all their funding. They wouldn't have really much left over. The level 1 waiver, what is it, $5,700 a year for HPC, something like that, which ends up, the rule of thumb is about 5 hours a week is what we tell people. So you get about 5 hours a week of services with that level 1 funding.
Great, thank you, Brian and Cheryl.
Along with the level 1, it also can help pay for some of those day services, vocational support, so that in combination might work for some folks. And it really does, with each of the waiver, it depends on what else you want to spend the funding that's available on. Maybe some technology, assistive technology, might help with some of the supervision needs so that funding can go for transportation or for vocational services. So we're really at a great place now where there's a lot more options in regards to the combinations of different services and in looking at how that can be paired to maximize what funding is available.
Thank you. This question says for the parents, but I think it's going to be for other folks because, and it talks about residential facility, and since neither of these parents here on our panel have children in a residential facility, they're in residences, private residences. For the other folks, when parents are looking for a place for their adult child to live, do they tour those homes? Do they choose the least location if they're going to be getting a housing voucher? What's that look like again with boots on the ground? Can Union County, can you talk about that a little bit, Chris?
Yes, we typically have them, it varies, but we typically have them tour the home, take a look at it, make sure it meets their needs. A lot of times we'll sit down, they'll have a meet and greet with the current residents there.
experience or seen how that works with families? Jeff? Cheryl, go ahead. You're reaching for it. I see it. All right.
I mean, I would echo what Chris said. We would just try to bend over backwards to have those opportunities for people to get face time, to spend quality time together, to explore shared interests, to make it the best possible fit. I mean, this is something very unique to housing out in the community. A lot of times you get any sort of government subsidized program and you're going down a list and you're given an option and you're told to go out there and find it. This is trying to make the fit work as best as we are able within our means. And so there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of answers, there's a lot of talking through fears, there's a lot of working through misconceptions, there's a lot of trying to make sure that the two teams are kind of on the same page about timelines, about expectations before we would actually move forward. All of that happens not in a vacuum, but through these visits and through conversations that are going on at the team level. So they're all slightly unique, but they're all opportunities for us to make sure everybody gets to know each other and that all those things are vetted properly.
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing is that there is no cookie cutter transition to residential living outside the home. Every plan is unique. There might be commonalities across them, but every plan is as unique as the individual who it's being prepared for and with. Okay, so I'm hearing Diane. This is for Critty. Critty, the question says that this person has a level 1 waiver but's not eligible for financial support through the waiver. Can the child utilize residential services through creative housing?
So we are a landlord and don't provide residential services. So if you're speaking to support services, I unfortunately can't.
Well, I think that's great that you just clarified that. So you're a landlord. You own homes.
Yes.
And people with disabilities live in those homes, and rent is paid to you.
Correct.
And so you don't necessarily need a waiver to live in one of your homes if the rent can get paid?
No. So we provide supported living homes, and they're
Okay.
tied to waivers, and the county board gives us the referrals for those residents.
So only people who are on a waiver can live in a creative housing house because that's part of the deal. You have supports through a waiver.
Correct.
Great, thank you. I think that clarified it for me. I didn't know that until just now.
And we also do we have a rent subsidy for private market. So we support individuals that live both in our houses as well as in the private market.
Thank you. This question is asking someone to talk about transportation services to and from work, the grocery store, when the adult is living outside of the home. Can someone, maybe a parent, can you talk about how Frankie or Aaron does that?
Frankie is, currently he's very independent, so a lot of the times he actually takes the bus to the grocery store or to the movies or to his job. He does live right on the bus route, which was really important for him. He also has staff that takes him wherever he needs to go. He gets like a certain amount of funding, of a certain amount of miles per month.
Thank you.
Yeah, Erin goes to a day hab 5 days a week, and transportation is included in that. And then her staff, we encourage many outings, so they have to have, the appropriate license and no tickets and all of that, so that they keep track of her mileage, and that's part of the waiver too. They go out a lot.
Thank you. This question is, does anyone know what the ODMEBB is? And which Medicaid providers are required to complete that training?
Oh, the electric verification?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Ohio Department of Medicaid electronic verification system is something that is going on in the broader Medicaid world. And quite frankly, it's been not easy to implement, and they haven't fully thought through, I think, how it impacts the unique needs of the folks that we
What is it?
It is basically an electronic, looks like a cell phone, but it's only for the purposes of checking in and checking out from work and some other kind of GPS type things. And it will show up on people's front door in a FedEx box and wasn't clearly communicated to people who were receiving it. And so all of this to say that I think it's probably too early to talk about it because they're on the fence about what it's going to look like.
Okay.
I'm hearing that they may be revisiting the idea of this. There was a requirement for all provider agencies to become compliant with that sometime in this year. From what I hear talking to people, I think everybody's kind of in a holding pattern to get some state guidance.
So that sounds like a specific question that if people have specific questions about that, they should email you. But for the broader conversation, probably not that most people here need to be really concerned about here tonight.
Yeah,
Great.
I want to assure you it's not something you need to be feeling anxiety about.
Thank you. So send an email to Jeff. Is there a long wait list to go from a level 1 to an IO waiver? Maybe.
With the waiting list changes that are being put in place, and we're in a transition period now where we had a waiting list of, get on a waiting list if you need a waiver. With the wait list changes, it really is assessing your need right now. So and we're in a transition period where folks that have been on it are being assessed. Anybody new asking for waivers are being assessed as they come up. What it looks at is if you're on a level 1 now, but your needs have changed, maybe something has happened in your life and you need more, then we would do a reassessment and look at that assessment of, are you needing something more in the next 12 months? Or are you needing something urgently now? And that kind of guides then the discussion in regards to maybe needing to switch to a different waiver. The other thing too is the funding that may be available at a county level in regards to applying for those waiver services, because the county needs to put up the local match for that service. So that may differ from county to county in regards to how quickly that can happen. But if there's an urgent need, we need to address that now.
And aging parents or parents who could once do something while the child was on a level 1 and can't do it anymore, that is a change in circumstance, correct?
Yes, yes, that would be one of the circumstances, is the loss of caregiver or caregiver ability.
And just briefly, this fix the list was, they said the list was too long. It had people on it who were 6 months old and were getting all the care they needed through parents and other supports, and they were on a waiver wait list. And now the idea is, let's get people on the wait list who need it now or need it in the very near future.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, because we had a lot of, like you said, there are a lot of folks that you need to get on this list even if you don't need it right now.
Well, I used to tell them that.
Yes, you did. And so did I at one point in time. It was like, get on the list. And we were all doing it, but we're changing how we're using those services at this point in viewing it, because that list, we had people on multiple lists as well. There would be somebody on Franklin County's list, and Union County, and Delaware, and Madison, and so they're on multiple lists, but it wasn't being coordinated across the state. Now we're really getting to who do we need to serve now.
Great, thank you. And we've reached the end of this roundtable. I think that I'd like to close first by thanking our panel members who volunteered their time tonight to come out and talk. And Kristen and Aaron for organizing all of this tonight. And I think that the message again is, look around. You are not alone. Okay, there are people who are here to help you, both around you and up here, and no matter what, it can be done. If you want to have it happen, it can be done, and there are ways to do it, and people to help, and everybody just wants, I think everybody in this room wants one thing, and it's the best for their person that they love who happens to have a disability or challenges. So thank you guys for being here. We couldn't do it without you. Thanks.